once in a while, I'll read something purely because it's about to be adapted into a show or movie. What's the psychology behind that? Well, I'm sure some would say it's hipster elitism, and honestly, they're not entirely wrong. I do like whipping out my, "Your Honor, the manga was better" card, but there's worlds beyond that. On another level, I see the future time I might invest in this product, and it scares me. What if I watch everything and I don't like it? I mean, where would that leave me? That's like 12 episodes, 25 episodes, 12 episodes? I could have gotten through Paranoia Agent in that time, but I guess I'll just never fucking watch it. So, I use protection and read the source material ahead of time to see if I'll like the show. I don't see any holes in that theory. Finally, sometimes I hear about a series getting an adaptation and think, man, if that's getting animated, there must be something about it worth experiencing. And since I enjoy reading more than I enjoy watching anyway, it's pretty good motivation to throw my body on the ground floor. Kaiju No. 8 was a bit of all three. I've seen the name of this series tossed around a fair amount in the modern shonen manga sphere, but weirdly enough, I've never actually heard anything about it. It's promoted all over Jump, there's a spin-off series, light novels, the whole 9 yards, but does anybody actually have an opinion? I figured this was a big old me problem and that I was somehow oblivious. Plus, I remember somebody recommending the series to me on Twitter way back when I was still on Twitter, so I gave it a completely blind, preconceptionless read. Weirdly enough, this might be the most blind I've ever gone into any manga I've read, short of giving Ichinose Family's Deadly Sins a chance when it started, which was the greatest decision I've ever made. Bringing up that series isn't even one of my usual pointless script editions this time, and here's why. With its anime on the horizon, Kaiju No. 8 has the potential to be the next big thing. One of the new gen anime to grab Shonen Jump out of the hole the end of the last generation is about to leave it in, and rocket it back up to the top of the polls. I seriously think this series could be a big deal. But dear God, I wish I could say that about Ichinose Family's Deadly Sins instead. We'll pick that apart in a moment, but first, why is Kaiju No. 8 popular? And even though the terms don't actually mean the same thing, I'm really talking about what's good about it here. Let's start with what I think is the biggest reason for its popularity as well as its best quality. I hate trying to talk about action in manga because I can never actually verbalize my criticisms. I work for hours and hours writing a sentence, deleting a sentence, writing a paragraph, deleting a paragraph, write, delete, write, delete, write, delete, write. Then around 11 o'clock at night, I give up and settle for the sauce meter. Either they got the sauce or they don't. Kubo's the sauciest, Ishida's dry. I wish that wasn't the case though, because I don't feel like a fair critic if I don't back up my claim with evidence. And in all fairness to Naoya Matsumoto, Kaiju No. 8 is dripping with sauce. Each major panel is wonderfully detailed and kinetic, with clear, easy-to-take-in poses, and the line of motion between them is downright impeccable. It's not uncommon when reading manga to look at one image you understand, alright, pretty cool, I think I get it. Then you move your eyes 3 inches to the right and you realize that you must have blacked out and woken up in a whole new time zone. That or the art is just shit. Either way, Kaiju No. 8's art is not shit. The reader never has to reorient themselves in space between panels due to janky-ass 180-degree line breaks or an overactive video game camera. Instead, each angle seamlessly transitions to the next, and oftentimes smaller panels are included before a big move that telegraph the exact trajectory of the character in question, causing your eyes to pretty much animate the series themselves. The ride doesn't stop once you reach that equals sign though. Thanks to some pretty incredible impact panels and shockwave effects, the answer to the equation is typically a dump truck to the face. Every combat sequence is just so fun to read and satisfying to finish that I can't even work up the spirit to complain about how badly skewed the action to dialogue ratio is. I'm just happy to be along for the ride. This is the best action I've seen in black and white since Bleach.
That's high praise!
Since we're in the neighborhood anyways, now is probably a good time to say that the overall art is great. Matsumoto's style is on the more cartoony side, utilizing fairly simple but incredibly defined portraits that allow him to really reach for some crazier sequences without sacrificing consistency. Then there's his talent for making characters pop off the page like a 3D movie. Basically, none of his characters ever get caught up in the background. There is a bit of a side effect to these stylistic choices, that being that the series is surprisingly cute, weirdly. Everything is kinda chibi adjacent. I mean, look at this guy. Aww, I want to stuff him and sleep with him every night. I feel like that kinda came off wrong. Point being, this is definitely intentional and also a great choice. One, for all the reasons I just cited that are enabled by it, and two, because it really ups the charm factor. Kafka wouldn't be half as lovable as he is if he didn't look like the plush version of himself at all times. That's not even mentioning how well the art style meshes with the overall tone, but I'm getting there. I'm never actually getting there. All the visual qualities I just broke down are actually the lion's share of why I think the upcoming anime is going to be so successful. Many of the most beautiful manga to anime transitions I can think of, FMA, Mob Psycho 100, Soul Eater. Wait, are these all just Bones shows? Share these same aesthetic qualities. With a talented studio like Production IG at the reins, we're bound to get some electric fights, and the trailers all but confirm that. They do say beauty is skin deep though. I of course disagree, I think your kidneys are very alluring, my dear. But let's go with conventional wisdom for now. What about Kaiju No. 8's narrative has made it successful? What really drives this story is the characters, specifically the relationship between its two leads, Kafka Hibino and Reino Ichikawa. There's nothing special about Kafka, both within his own universe and within the context of shonen protagonists at large. He's a go-getting young boy who wants something really bad. Rather a dime a dozen, except for one little thing. He's old as shit. No, I'm not kidding. You thought it was unrealistic that Yamamoto can still move his body like this? Well, Kafka is 32. It's amazing he hasn't died of fucking organ failure yet.
I've fallen.
Age really is the only difference between Kafka and a sea of same old, same old. But that seemingly aesthetic choice is pulling a lot more weight than you'd probably expect. Under the context of him being aged and out of his prime, Kafka's big goal is reframed into a childhood dream turned lost ambition. He's like Naruto, if he never passed the graduation test and spent the next 15 years sweeping the floors of the Hokage chamber while cracking open Bud Lights to make the nights more tolerable. The children Shonen Jump is technically made for might have a harder time connecting with him because of that, but anyone who's gotten old enough to leave a dream by the wayside after repeated failures due to embarrassment, or before starting for fear of that embarrassment, will find Kafka engrossingly sympathetic. He's an adult reader's protagonist, but he wouldn't belong in Shonen if he just sat around working on his dad bod forever. Now, we need to fit a plot in here somewhere, and that's where Reino comes in. Reino Ichikawa steps onto the stage, and it's immediately clear what role he'll serve in the narrative. He's Sasuke, the cooler, hotter, more talented counterpart to the protagonist who treats others coldly and possesses a single-minded dedication to achieving their goal. How original, was my first thought, but just like Kafka, there's one little difference that makes him a whole new character. He's got white hair. No, okay, for real this time, it's why he is the way that he is that makes him interesting. He shows up in the Kaiju cleanup office thinking himself above the work before immediately putting some disrespect on Kafka's name. But yeah, it's not like, there's plenty of things I hate, not a lot that I like, and someone I have sworn to kill. With this sacred treasure, No.
He tricked me.
Reino speaks not out of bitterness, but out of indignation. He still has those big dreams that his superior long since let go, but he's still young and hasn't learned the shame that caused Kafka's grasps to slip. Because of that, the passion that his archetype would usually funnel into the problem created by their secret tragic past is directed towards pushing others upwards. No matter how abrasive his words may seem at first, he was always doing his best to help, and there's real wisdom to be found there. Shame is a sham emotion. I mean, sure, it served an evolutionary purpose, helping humans figure out which behaviors would get them booted from their tribe and then discouraging them from engaging in them, but things quickly got out of control. In the modern world, our brains just spam shame like it's a Hadoken anytime we receive even mild negative feedback. It's so bad you'd think we have a self-sabotage kink, and everybody could use a reminder that if you've got a dream, you can't allow anything to stop you, including the march of time. Reino is an all-purpose gym bro, and on the other end of the spectrum, he still has a lot to learn from Kafka too. After less than a day of boofing duty, except he's the drugs, he comes down off his high horse and shows some respect to the working-class people of the world. It's basically that principle where nobody who has ever worked retail is ever rude to a retail worker again. Respect is actually the most apt word to describe this relationship. They very quickly come to respect each other, pretty much skipping over that entire, oh, we hate each other phase. And from that point on, the two share the most wholesome shonen rivalry I've ever seen. They don't even really read as rivals, they're just friends. Throughout the series, they do everything within their ability to support and push each other to their goals. Throw a solid comedic dynamic into there, and you've got what is just a refreshing sight for this genre. I'm never unhappy to see them interact, and there's a reason why the series hits a lull the second they go off on their own respective plotlines. There are other characters in the series that I should probably talk about at some point, so we're going to do that, and the logical place to start would probably be Kikoru Shinomiya. Shinomiya, not all that dissimilar from what I assume to be the source of her name, falls into the prodigy of ability but not really of conversation archetype. She's unbelievably talented, but also standoffish and superior, not willing to consider the feelings of those quote-unquote beneath her. That's what Matsumoto wants you to believe on first impression, but the archetype is quickly twisted as she and Kafka grow to respect each other. Due to their open minds, they develop a supportive relationship based around pushing one another to reach their full potential, and it's very wholesome. Then there's Iharu, who starts off as your typical impulsive hothead. He rushes forward without thinking because he wants to claim all the glory for himself, but that's what Matsumoto wants you to believe on first impression. The archetype is quickly twisted as he grows to respect his comrades, and he develops a relationship with them based around pushing one another to reach their full potential, and it's very wholesome. Then there's Hoshina, who starts off as your typical mentor/superior archetype. Due to his position of authority, there's some doubt as to whether or not he can be fully trusted to fight for what's right, but that's what Matsumoto wants you to believe on first impression. The archetype is quickly twisted as he comes to respect his inferiors, developing a group dynamic based around pushing them to reach their full potential, and it's very wholesome. Then there's, can I cut this bit already? I mean, I probably already let it run on for too long. I think you already get the point, and I also can't remember the names of the other characters. Why is everybody so goddamn nice to each other? Every character in Kaiju No. 8 feels like the exact template of a shonen archetype, down to the mannerisms, combat styles, basic backstories, except all of the edge is removed. On the surface, I get this choice. I mean, after edging for so long, the genre needs some sort of climax. But I'm not sure if the purpose of these kinds of character traits were fully considered before removing them. This graph is inherently more interesting than this graph, and that's because uniformity is boring. There's nothing to consider. Contrast is what creates conflict, is what creates interest. Look, I get it. Kafka and Reino's relationship is super charming, and the reason for that is because of how supportive and respectful it is. But you can't just copy-paste it onto the rest of the cast and call that good character writing. Not only does it water down the original, it also deprives the series of basically any interpersonal conflict whatsoever. What about Iharu is supposed to be interesting at all if he's a soft boy like everybody else? Speaking of Iharu, he's one of the many characters in Kaiju No. 8 who suffer from a rushed character arc. In this case, we barely get introduced to him and his abrasive personality before he's going, "I'm the one saving you, dumbass," and "No, don't kill Reino, he's too sexy. You're so sexy. I love my friends." It feels like Matsumoto saw characters like Hiei and Jean and wanted to create the same emotional effect in his own story, but he didn't realize that what makes them work is having the space to build their arcs naturally over time. The same problem rears its head with Elder Shinomiya, who's exactly the powerful elder archetype you've seen in Bleach, Naruto, Hunter x Hunter, etc., meaning he has exactly two things to do in this story. Get over his conservative distrust of the main character and their strange abilities, and then die.
Life is nothing. You serve zero purpose. You should kill.
Both of those things happen shockingly quickly, to the point where you don't feel any satisfaction in Kafka earning his trust or any loss upon his death. That's 0 for 2 there, bud. This wouldn't be so bad if he was just a side character or something, but you being invested in him is absolutely integral to the ongoing storyline. Most of the supporting cast have similarly underbaked arcs, meaning the series takes a dip pretty much every time Kafka isn't around, and he's not quite interesting enough to be around all the time. Characters are not everything in a story, though. I mean, a really, really big, important thing, but not the only thing. There's still the actual plot to think of, so what is Kaiju No. 8 actually about? At its core, this is a tale of monsters and militarism. For as long as they can remember, humanity has been under siege from a species of gargantuan creatures, mysterious in origin and man-eating in nature, forcing the development of special suit technology that allows the insignificant ants of our species to fight back and reach the small weak points on the enemies that serve as our only hope of victory. This technology is consolidated in a special military force whose vitality to the defense of the state leads them to the forefront of the nation's operation. Then one day, a young boy and a young girl suffer loss at the hands of these monsters, elucidating the true level of their destructive power and resulting in a vow to become soldiers and put an end to every last one of them. The girl overflows with talent while the boy possesses limitless spirit, pushing her up through the ranks and him into the lowest role possible. However, little did anyone know that he would gain the ability to transform into one of the monsters, bridging the gap between species and making him into the linchpin of humanity's future defense. Good timing, as new breeds of creatures are emerging who may just be closer to mankind than anyone ever could have imagined, and... Wait, is this just Attack on Titan?
If I lose my ball, second doll.
I was pretty surprised when I looked up Naoya Matsumoto and discovered that he had several series under his belt prior to Kaiju No. 8, especially that they were both published in Shonen Jump as well, because this reads like somebody's entry into the sphere. It takes an immensely popular series and generously borrows from it, hoping to slip into the release gaps left by the original, possibly even fill the void left by its ending. I'm assuming intentions here with a cynical eye, but after taking a cursory look at those two previous series, neither of which I've read, I'm pretty convinced and Kaiju No. 8's direction makes sense. Neko Wappa and Pochikuro both ended before reaching 50 chapters, so the most marketable choice probably seemed like the only choice for Matsumoto, bringing us to the current predicament. Everything from the core concept of the series to the special class of monster whose abilities get used by human characters screams Attack on Titan. And sure, that's a bit derivative, but is it really so bad? I mean, AOT is legendary at this point, one of the best. And you know what they say about who you choose to steal from. If Kaiju No. 8 could muster a similar energy and quality level to Isayama's work, that would probably be enough to make it pretty good. But that thought arises before you realize that the comparisons I've made so far are no more than cosmetic. What really made Attack on Titan great was its character work and insane genre-defying plotting. Strip that away and you've got Season 1, which was good, but lacking a lot of substance. Now strip away every other unique element, and you've got Kaiju No. 8. This is easily one of the most by-the-book, straightforward shonen I've ever read. Main character sucks with the power system, but has a unique ability to set them apart. Do an entrance exam arc, I need to get stronger. Do some training arcs, I want to get stronger. Kill off the last generation's leader, I need to get stronger. Introduce villain group, I have to get stronger. I want to get stronger, I need to get stronger. Jesus Christ! I never want to hear a shonen character say that they want to get stronger
right,
ever
ladies?
again. Half the cast goes through the exact same arc of getting their asses kicked, crying a bit while saying, I was so helpless, I couldn't do anything, then vowing to improve and win next time. Which is already the most generic shonen arc, even when you aren't being inundated with it over and over again. That's the whole series. Just Attack on Titan jammed into the shonen mold. Now, it's not like shonen have to be super original to be great, even in the modern age. I mean, plenty of the best take time-tested conventions for themselves, but the important difference that makes them good is that they use those conventions as a launchpad for a better idea. Sukuna is a very clear riff on the Nine-Tailed Fox, with equally similar mechanics and base rules. But the dynamic between him and his host character, as well as his role in the plot, are completely different. Kaiju No. 8 takes its own riff on the very same two souls, one body deal, but what does it do to push the idea further? Yeah, about what you'd expect based on the tone of this video. It's Kurama, except however much of that relationship you can fit into a much faster and shorter narrative. That doesn't make the execution awful by any means. I mean, the template is a template for a reason. It works, but without any expansion, that's all it does. Function. Leaving the series in a position where it can basically only be enjoyed fully if it's your first shonen. And that's before you consider the long-term downward trajectory. Even the unequivocally fantastic elements of Matsumoto's work have experienced diminishing returns. One difference from the source material that defined the early arcs and that I thought was great was how the military doesn't immediately become aware of Kaiju No. 8's ability. Eren strips on the battlefield one time and he's immediately the linchpin of every strategy, but Kafka has to control himself. A lot of the action scenes revolve around him having to find the right time and method to unleash his abilities without giving away the secret, or on some occasions having to choose whether it's worth it to let people die to maintain it. It's a fun dynamic that adds a lot of tension to the combat, but of course nothing great ever lasts. Eventually he gets folded into the military ranks as a kaiju, at which point he becomes the problem-solving button, or Wolfram Alpha if you will. Without that original dynamic, the fights remain gorgeously composed, but ring pretty hollow. Maybe this seems like a weird point to pick on at this point in the video, but I'm doing so because it pretty well represents my biggest problem with the whole series, as well as the fact that I'm trying to wrap this up. It never grows to be anything more than it initially was. Mainly due to the ways they're produced, manga are uniquely positioned to show off growth compared to most other forms of art. In a series of television, novels, films, etc., you may see quality spikes in one direction or another between entries, and those might create a consistent slant over time, but it never feels like as much a part of the series' identity as it does with manga. These stories are constantly and chaotically produced. Not great for the health of the creators, and a problem we should really do something about, but the effects of that process are part of the charm. A big reason why I love JoJo's or One Piece or Bleh or Siren is the meta-narrative running alongside them. As the characters grow, so do the artists. They learn to draw better portraits, to lay out their panels more creatively, to write their characters and plots more satisfyingly. Evolution is a part of what makes shonen manga so gratifying, both for individual series and for the genre as a whole, but I don't believe that Kaiju No. 8 is a part of that. All of the pieces left in place since the beginning have stagnated, and the ones that were removed were never replaced. Nothing is done to move itself or the genre forward, and that's why I hope it's not the shonen of tomorrow. A future defined on these terms is a future full of more of the same. I forgot to even fucking mention the villain. He sucks.
Boo! Don't like it.
That's a bit harsher than I actually want to be, so here's a personal message to Naoya Matsumoto, who will definitely never hear this and probably doesn't even speak English. You are seriously talented. You have so much potential as an artist, and I hate to see it stagnating. The good news is that Kaiju No. 8 isn't over. There's still time for this series to evolve into something great, and I really hope you get there, because then I'd feel less bad about spending all that time reading it. In the meantime, though, all you viewers at home can probably skip it. Just read Ichinose Family's Deadly Sins. Or The Elusive Samurai. Or both. There's a fun idea. Until next time.
Whoa, wow.
music dance experience is officially canceled.